Did they
But
think that street gangs were ninja?
Well, we had a lot of turtles that were roaming the streets at the time, and
that's right. And they got confused with terrapins as well, which was quite an issue.
Yeah, so I mean, how was it structured at the time? Because, you know, the two of you, it seems like the two of you kind of stuck together title after title. Were there sort of split teams? Or I guess, David, you were probably doing music for just about everything, come to think of it. Right?
I was at that time, yes. What felt like hundreds of games, although it's probably only about 30 or 40.
I think Dave was the only musician for a number of years, particularly on the NES.
Yes.
I think I did the math once on rare developed games on the NES, and it came out to one a month.
That's quite a lot, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was only a very small graphics department, and it was still quite an involving task to produce all the graphics, but often you were shared among the sort of passed around among the software engineers. And because software engineers, graphic engineer, we were called a graphic engineer because we made graphics. And I'd work on maybe 3 games at once. One of them would probably get canned, and then the other one would continue, and then maybe somebody would jump on board. But you'd have a couple. I might be working on Nightmare on Elm Street at the same time as I don't know, as a racing game that got canned or something like that. There was always a lot that we had to sort of take on board because we were such a small company to begin with. And so Dave would be writing tunes for sort of 5 or 6 games at once, and it would be very. You would see an awful lot of you, and you must have discs full of old stuff.
I still have those discs somewhere, probably in the loft. But I also noticed here, just as a sort of observation, that, you know, like software engineer, graphic engineer, musician. I didn't get the grand title.
You're not a music engineer?
No, musician.
I do want to pause real quick just because something Kev said just brought up something that this seems like a unique opportunity to ask about. In our files at the Video Game History Foundation, we collect a lot of like promotional material, things that were handed out at trade shows, stuff like that. And we have an early sales kit from LJN, which is the publisher you worked with, that has a flyer for Nightmare on Elm Street, which Kev mentioned. But the flyer describes a different game where you're actually playing as Freddy murdering children as opposed to playing as the children running from Freddy. Is that anything? And there are screenshots. Was that a rare game to your recollection?
No, you couldn't control him. I don't know whether it's just one of those games that maybe had two different pieces of software, and they decided to go with version A rather than version B. Because I mean, I remember, actually, I'm sure I remember Mark Bettridge picking out a screenshot, and I don't know if it was in one of those Japanese magazines, Famitsu magazine, is it? I think there was a picture of Freddy Krueger just slashing away at everybody, and you could control him, which kind of like Splatterhouse or something like that. It used the 4-play device, didn't it? Because you could have 4 controllers rigged up at once.
Yeah.
I mean, the game itself was, I think it was one of the first bigger games that I was sort of let loose on. It was just one software engineer, one graphics guy, graphic engineer, and one music engineer, sound engineer called Dave. And between us, there were no designers back then. It was, we'll make this thing work. And there was a bit of liaison with LJN. We get some faxes, say, maybe it could do this, maybe it could do that. And they sort of work with us on the design a little bit. And we just put a game together, and it did everything it needed to do. But when I look at it now, I ask the question, why does it do this and why does it do that? But I think we wanted to get that, I think, the Dream Warriors different aspects in there from it was Nightmare on Elm Street 3, was it, where you got the ninja and the magician and everybody. So we thought it was a good opportunity to use this four-player device. And so I remember when Dave did the music to the title page, it played this tune, and I said, that's not the Nightmare on Elm Street theme. And I didn't realize that we weren't allowed to use the actual music. So Dave had to do a a very similar. It was almost like the same thing but played backwards. But yeah, there was always a problem with licensing.
It's similar but not quite the same.
Yeah, everything that was licensed, it can be Roger Rabbit or it can be Beetlejuice, but it can't look like Michael Keaton. It can't sound. It needs to sound like Nightmare on Elm Street, but it can't be Nightmare on Elm Street. And then you look at the reviews online, and people slate it. Said, this isn't even the music. So
yeah, I was going to say what a lot of people don't realise is that there wasn't much profit in each cartridge. And if you use the exact music, you'd have to pay a license fee, and that would probably obliterate the entire profit for each cartridge sale. So we didn't have the luxury of being able to use those at that time. And the same would have been similar for graphics or stuff like that.
Yeah, likenesses, of course. Yeah.
Mm.
So you guys have touched on this a little bit, but curious kind of what the roles were there compared to how they started evolving over time, because you're talking about there being people working specifically on graphics, a person working specifically on music, and then programmers. But I mean, the game doesn't get designed back then really by any one person. This is just sort of a collaborative process. Am I reading that right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I think we'd have several products on the go, and they'd get to a point where they were becoming established, and then we'd probably look at design, because Tim might have been working on Battletoads with Mark. I may have been working on, say, WrestleMania or something like that, and then we get to a certain point and we do a review and say, right, we need to roll back this and do that, because we didn't have a design department as such. We started to get people in design that it was a few years later when we were getting towards the Super NES, towards the end of the 8-bit era, we were getting designers in. And I think one of the designers, Greg Males, who's actually still at Rare Limited, he began as a games tester. And so a lot of our designers, it's a good way to get into the video game industries, to get into the R&D, the testing department, and just show an interest in design. And I think that's what happened with Greg, and look at him now, he's still there all these years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do remember at the time that having somebody especially or just specifically to do design seemed like such a flamboyant position. Yet these days it's such a critical position. But I can remember then it seemed like an extra that we were very lucky to have, and almost seemed wasteful at times.
And also Mark, who was our main lead software engineer, he had a really good feel for what controlled well. Even when we moved on to 3D, he was very good at all that. And so he'd just try things out, and he'd be there very late at night. Say, oh, look at this, I've got this, try this the next morning. And you say, oh, I love what you've done with that. And he would just take it from there, and we'd elaborate on it. And then Tim would do some pretty graphics. And then it was like Snake Rattle and Roll was a good example of that. It was, again, no design team. But Tim and Chris had got plenty of experience, as I said, with designing from the previous company at Ultimate. So they were our design mentors, if you like. And so this is why they would come and oversee each little team and make sure that the games were going in the right direction. But an awful lot of them are on a pile somewhere, and I'd love to see some of those, like the N64 Star Fox. It's there's so many cartridges that we ROMmed up with versions of this and versions of that, and I'm just waiting to see what's going to rear its head. It's maybe not so ugly head, but some things. I don't believe all these ROMs have disappeared. They must be lying around somewhere. Some real gems out there.
I definitely want to get back to that later on, but so just kind of going through, you know, how we get to a game like Dinosaur Planet. I sort of think of, you know, the next big leap for your studio as being Donkey Kong Country, as sort of, you know, establishing. Well, I mean, it's the first time you're doing 3D graphics, I believe, even though it's rendered in 2D on the system. It's you know, probably your biggest hit to date, I would imagine, and you were both really instrumental in that game, right? Because Kev, I believe you were the character designer for all of the characters in Donkey Kong Country.
I was very lucky to get that gig. It was we'd invested in 2 silicon graphics machines to start seeing if we could branch out. And I didn't understand why Tim wanted them to begin with, because how can we possibly produce all of the effects like this in these? Because I didn't realize how far the consoles were going to progress. It was games that we first did were all 2D, and then we were moving on to this 2.5D, if you like, with the pre-rendered stuff. I think I first started looking at it when we were working on the Battletoads coin op. I'd rendered a few great big iron balls that rolled towards the camera at the end of the game, and the spaceship that you sort of flew along on the shoot 'em up level on the arcade machine. They were pre-rendered graphics, and so we continued experimenting with that, and we'd started to put together a small test for a fighting game, because it's all I ever wanted to do was make a fighting game. And but yes, I think around about that time, Nintendo were looking for a game to beat Aladdin, which was appearing on the Mega Drive, because it was so beautiful to look at, the animation. They needed something special, and they happened to come over and see us shortly after we'd invested in these machines and started experimenting, and we showed them the fighting demo, and they were blown away by it. And we didn't realize how great the effect was going to look, because I say when I first tried it out, it was low resolution and not very many colors. But when we actually put the test together, after they'd asked us whether we'd like to try experimenting with Donkey Kong, couldn't believe how good it looked. On a CRT TV, so it's slightly blurred, and when the thing's moving and the shadows and the shading underneath all the arms and everything just starts moving, it just suddenly looks so solid, and we've got that into sort of 15 colors for a sprite, and it just works so well. But yeah, I received these faxes from Nintendo saying this is Donkey Kong. He hasn't seen the light of day for about 10 years. We'd like you to redesign him and do that magic that you're doing with the 3D graphics with him. And so Tim started working on the backgrounds, and he started modeling all these rubber tree leaves and lots of different platforms. And I started building a character, and we put it together on a cartridge, and we had lots and lots more frames than were actually on the final game. But we had this really smooth Donkey Kong running along a level. It's just sort of a raised platform area, and then it rained, and we had one of our brilliant software engineers was very good at doing special effects, called Brendan Gunn. He put a nice title page together. I think he was quite heavily involved in that demo to begin with, because I can remember the Donkey Kong rolled down, did that special effect that Brendan liked to do, and Dave started putting the music together for it, and then we had this really glossy little demo. And as soon as Nintendo had seen that, I think that's when they started investing in many more silicon graphics machines, and so we then had to start hiring a lot more talent, real artists.
I still can't get over just the idea of Nintendo handing over a character and trusting someone to do a redesign of it. I mean, making it 3D is one thing, but trusting with any sort of redesigning of a character, it feels Donkey. Yeah, I know. I mean, but absolutely. Any character, but especially Donkey Kong.
Basically, I just stuck the Battletoads eyes on DK, made him really compact, and because everything, I'm just holding up this little post-it now. All of the sprites that we were used to creating for the NES, everything was in like a 2x2 sort of sprite area, so it was nice and compact like this. And so when I designed the new DK, it was really, I almost made him like cube-like, because I wanted him to work well with the 4x4s, which would make up the map, and the 8x8s or whatever it was that you were using. And I didn't want any overhangs or issues with it. And also I was concerned about how many sprites we were going to be putting on the screen, and so I wanted to get them nice and compact.